Chapter 866. After the ambushes. As they pursued Snow Eagle, what met Happy was ambush after ambush. These sorts of battles weren't really hard, but they weren't really easy either. Since there were so many people fighting, the situation was usually rather chaotic and demanded a high level of cooperation between teammates. This sort of thing couldn't stop Yishu and Co from progressing. Their entire pursuit was mostly smooth going. Snow Eagle's ambushes were dealt with one after another. After wiping out 4 consecutive ambushes, the path came to an end and Snow Eagle charged into the courtyard at the end of the road. Seeing this, they realized that this was most likely the place where the battle against Snow Eagle would take place. Since they were constantly in combat, they couldn't really take a real break. Using food and similar methods to restore health and mana was something you could only do out of combat. However, if they left combat now, the system would probably deem them to have failed everything starting from the moment they entered combat with Snow Eagle, and they would have to start over. They couldn't allow themselves to make such a low-level mistake. All 10 of them charged into the courtyard and, as expected, elite monsters came out from different rooms in the courtyard. However, this no longer seemed like an ambush set by Snow Eagle. The boss was yelling and crying out in a panic. It was evident that after the 4 ambushes had been wiped out, he was at the end of his line. This wave of monsters was made up of the reinforcements he had called out for. This wave of reinforcements was more powerful than the ambushes from before. The sealed mountain thieves that came out from the room in the courtyard amounted to a total of 12, more than any of the previous ambushes. However, after clearing out all the ambushes on the way, Yishu's group became used to these sorts of battles. Among the 12 sealed mountain thieves, there were 2 healers that immediately became their primary targets. As for Snow Eagle, now that he couldn't find any other way out, he flew onto the roof and began to lob attacks at Happy with the other thieves. Yet, this Snow Eagle's offensive ability really didn't live up to his title of boss. He wasn't much more of a threat than the individual thieves. However, a boss definitely would have far more health than these normal monsters, so everyone put Snow Eagle to the side for now, focusing on clearing out the normal monsters. Seeing Snow Eagle's appalling strength, everyone relaxed. The 12 sealed mountain thieves were quickly dealt with, being just normal monsters with a little more health than usual. There wasn't much to it. After a chaotic battle, all 12 of the sealed mountain thieves were killed. Everyone was prepared to turn their attacks on Snow Eagle, who was still perched on the roof, but then they heard the tactician yell out again. Everyone could clearly hear that the tactician had yelled out a title, Vice Chief. Then, they saw the doors to the large room facing the main entrance to the courtyard open, and a burly man walked out, stretching. It was another boss, Vice Chief Brown Bear ***. The progression of events was more than shocking for everyone present. If this tactician had called another few waves of mobs, it would be much better than just directly calling for a boss. This strapping man, who held the position of vice chief, was evidently not a weakling like Snow Eagle. Having experienced 5 battles without break, and now directly going up against 2 bosses, this battle seemed to be a grim one for their little team. Yishu clicked with his mouse, bringing up Brown Bear's health. It became clear that they wouldn't be able to finish this quickly, they couldn't afford the consumption. They had to slow the pace down and forcefully drag the battle out. But what was this Brown Bear's fighting style? Could they afford to draw out the match into one of endurance? Looking at his burly figure, he probably wasn't a defense-oriented boss like boss number 2, Sand Leopard. If he was an offense-oriented boss, then a slow-paced match would be far more dangerous. This was especially true with their opponents being not 1, but 2 bosses working together. Though Snow Eagle was rather weak, this was only in comparison to what should be expected from a boss. With his health bar, defeating him wouldn't be a swift job either. With a slippery guy like that causing chaos at the side, this would be frustrating to deal with, indeed. Brown Bear's appearance was very unexpected. Everyone was still inside the courtyard, not having the time to retreat so that Yishu's Lord Grim would have the chance to figure the boss out. By the time everyone had managed to process their current situation, Brown Bear had snapped out of his sleepy state and reached behind the door next to him, pulling out a spiked steel club ***. That's right, a spiked club. A weapon that didn't exist among any of the 24 classes. It was impossible to figure out this guy's possible skills using his weapon. Using a heavy weapon like this to do sword techniques wasn't beyond the shamelessness of bosses. Keep your distance, everyone. Same strategy as ever, Yi Shu would test out the boss's abilities first. However, this time everyone was in combat already, so if they could retreat or not wasn't up to them. Snow Eagle, who was still on the roof, had finally stopped his wretched behavior of hiding his broom between his legs. Now he held it in his hands, finally looking ready for battle. Using his advantage of the higher ground, he waved his arm and threw a lava flask at them. Yi Shu's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. Lord Grimm raised his myriad manifestation umbrella and with a bang, destroyed the flask in mid-air. The lava in the flask sprayed out, like it was raining fire. Though everyone still had to scatter to avoid it, it was better than if the flask shattered on the floor and turned the courtyard into a sea of flame. Wu Chen couldn't help but admire Yi Shu's skill. When the lava flask had been thrown, he had the awareness to try and shoot it down as well, but by the time he was aiming, a gunshot had already rung out. As for Chen Guo, there wasn't much to say. When she saw the lava flask, she had wanted to get Chasing Haze to jump up and run for it. The lava flask had been destroyed, but Snow Eagle swept his broom again and swept out a cloud. The boss was too fast and everyone was too far from him to interrupt the skill. This time, he managed to complete a hail. Blue drops and snowflakes fell from above and everyone hurried to rush out from under the cloud. Be careful, everyone, Yi Shu yelled. Brown Bear finally struck, roaring wildly. He raised his club up and behind his head, jumping into the courtyard from the room and swinging his arms up in a 180 degrees arc. With a massive thud, the club smashed into the ground and the tremors from it caused everyone's view to shake. Those who were unlucky enough to still be within range of the attack had been knocked to the ground, rolling. It's a collapsing mountain, Wei Chen cried out. Or it might be an earth-shattering slash, Yi Shu suggested. Just as low as expected, Wei Chen shouted. That's right, Yi Shu agreed. Using a sword skill with a club, that was definitely a new low for swordsmen. Whirlwind strike. Everyone get out of the courtyard. Seeing Brown Bear's movement, he made a quick judgment. Everyone had their characters run for the door, or flip over the wall, instantly escaping from the courtyard like wild animals. Then, Brown Bear returned to his room and Snow Eagle looked around before jumping from the roof and disappearing. Whoops, Wei Chen was a little embarrassed. It was evident that they had escaped combat. That battle seemed to be limited to the courtyard. With all of them fleeing from the courtyard, they had left the combat zone and the system judged that as escaping from combat. So, everything was returned to its prior state and the trouble they had just gone through was all for naught. At least we know what's going to happen now. Wei Chen attempted to gain everyone's forgiveness with a smile full of cheek. He hadn't thought of this possibility just now, so he had given the order to get out of the courtyard. In the end, everyone had charged out and the system didn't give them any chance to regret, directly viewing them as escaping from combat. Well, this isn't bad. When we do this again, everyone should keep in mind that what awaits us at the end are two bosses. We need to keep an eye on our mana consumption, Yi Shu said. Everyone nodded. 5 waves, each with a large number of normal monsters, ending in 2 bosses and not given a break, that was something only a team like them could handle. Or maybe we can just ignore these 2 and see if we can skip to directly take on the final boss, Wei Chen suggested. In some dungeons, you didn't necessarily need to kill every boss before the final one. When breaking dungeon records, people would definitely skip every skippable boss. In this sealed mountain thieves' hideout, it seemed that they might even be able to skip this tactician and vice chief, so Wei Chen had come up with such a suggestion. I don't think that's necessary. After all, these 2 have first kills that need to be taken, which will give us better rewards, Yi Shu said. In reality, I think this battle is pretty tough. I mean, we have to deal with all these ambushes and we might not be able to endure to the end with the amount of mana and whatnot it might consume, Wei Chen said. Let's give it a try first, Yi Shu said. If the situation goes south, then we'll escape combat to stay alive. I noticed that we only left combat when 5 people had left the courtyard. It seems like it's necessary for only half or more party members to stay inside. Yeah, I noticed that too, Wei Chen said. Hey, Yi Shu laughed lightly, not bothering to continue the conversation and turned to address everyone. Okay, everyone, let's head back and try again. This time, keep the pace slow to minimize consumption. The 10-player party then returned to where Snow Eagle had first appeared. As expected, the boss had returned to its original position. Hey, how's about we try and see if we can prevent this guy from running and kill him here? Wei Chen came up with a new idea. We can try. Everyone scatter, surround him, Yi Shu ordered, making everyone stand around in a circle just out of aggro range, encircling Snow Eagle. Attack together, including the ranged characters, siege him to death. With Yi Shu's order, everyone lunged for the boss. Snow Eagle was very decisive. Before, when only Lord Grimm had charged forwards, he had sent out a magic ray. Now, seeing how many people were targeting him, he didn't bother to do anything and simply got on his broom and shot into the sky. F***ck, so shameless, everyone could do nothing but watch as Snow Eagle flew off. This was because the height at which Snow Eagle was flying was one set by the system that players couldn't reach, no matter if it was with a witch's broom or a mechanic's rotor wing. This was obviously the system wanting Snow Eagle to get away successfully. Wu Chen and Chen Guo's launchers fired a few unfruitful blasts. Let's give chase. Yi Shu didn't reveal any sort of disappointment, he just once again led everyone in a chase after Snow Eagle. Chapter 867. Isolation. Knowing what was coming, their progression was smoother and more decisive than their previous attempt. After swiftly wiping out the 4 waves of ambushes, the 10 of them arrived once more in the courtyard. They killed the reinforcements, heard Frigid Eagle yelling for help, and saw the Vice Chief Brown Bear walk out lazily, just as he had before. This time, would they still be given the chance to strike first? Of course not. Frigid Eagle hadn't even managed to whip out his broom when with a clang sounded out with 2 flaming lighters landing at his feet. Bosses weren't dumb. Upon seeing these lighters, Frigid Eagle didn't bother taking out his broom and tried to run. He hadn't even managed to take 3 steps when the falling heat-seeking missiles hit, creating a mushroom cloud. With his arms outstretched in a flawless line, Frigid Eagle was blasted off of the roof. He hadn't even landed when, with a stab, a spear had already arrived. The immense force from the spear nailed Frigid Eagle to the door of one of the side rooms in the courtyard. It was Tang Ru, not Yi Shu, who had struck. Knowing what they would have to face, Happy had obviously devised plans on as they made their way over. Frigid Eagle's offensive capabilities weren't the best, but if they allowed him to jump about on that roof above their heads, he would become a very annoying distraction, so they eventually decided to deal with Frigid Eagle first. However, they still had to be careful about Brown Bear when dealing with Frigid Eagle. Currently, all they knew was that this guy's skills were probably from the swordsman classes, but they didn't know anything specific. The responsibility of figuring out these specifics fell on Yi Shu. Lord Grimm didn't wait for Brown Bear to jump into the courtyard before charging over. As for Frigid Eagle, he was under everyone else's focused attacks. With Yi Shu's ability, everyone knew that he could last a long time when facing any boss one-on-one. In addition, Frigid Eagle wasn't particularly powerful, so everyone hoped to take this chance and kill Frigid Eagle first. This strategy wasn't a bad one, but who would have thought that their plan would be thwarted just as they started? Brown Bear ignored the attacking Lord Grimm, and with a swing of his club, he jumped directly at the formation around Frigid Eagle. Watch out, Yi Shu yelled hurriedly. Everyone turned only to see Brown Bear's club slam into the ground. They hastily jumped and dodged to avoid the attack. Brown Bear's offense was abrupt, standing there and swinging his club once more. Tang Ru had no way of getting the currently airborne soft mist to dodge such a big guy. She was quickly slammed against the wall of a room on the east side by Brown Bear's club, as if retaliation for how she had just nailed Frigid Eagle to the door with her spear. Aggro sharing, Yi Shu suddenly yelled out this glory term. Everyone immediately understood what had happened when they heard this. They wanted to deal with Frigid Eagle and Brown Bear separately, but these 2 bosses shared aggro. Aggro sharing was when 2 or more monsters had the same aggro target, and would advance and retreat as one. Under these circumstances, it was impossible to separate this battle into 2. It seems like they at least have some sense of honor. After saying this, Wei Chen had Windward Formation raise his death's hand and a hexagram prison fell from the heavens, aiming to entrap Brown Bear. He had never expected that the weakling they believed Frigid Eagle to be would swing his broom then, seeming to throw the dust on the ground up and negating Windward Formation's hexagram prison. What the hell is this? Dispersion? Wei Chen was dumbstruck. Witches had a skill called Disperse Powder, which could get rid of a buff on its target. However, they hadn't heard of a powder that could disperse curses that had yet to hit its target like this. Of course, there would always be some original skills given to bosses. Yet these original skills were always so wretched, making players incapable of maintaining their cool. Windward Formation raised Death's hand again and began to cast the power Death's Door. Yet it was then that Frigid Eagle and Brown Bear both turned on him as one. Ayu, realizing that something was wrong, Wei Chen didn't care about the CD and wasted mana, hurriedly canceling the skill and dodging as he yelled, "The aggro is really chaotic. Hurry up and stabilize it." Without a specialized MT class, wanting to save the situation at times like this became a chore. If they couldn't save the situation, then they would just have to leave the situation be. Ice boundary, now. Gatling gun to suppress, Yi Shu ordered. "I'll handle Frigid Eagle, you go for Brown Bear," Wu Chen gave a shout, naturally directed at Chen Guo. The two launchers immediately activated Gatling gun, wildly firing at their respective targets. Frigid Eagle's small build was weak, getting pushed back continuously by the Gatling gun. Brown Bear was completely different. With a level suppression of 5 levels, the momentum from the Gatling gun seemed non-existent against him as he continued to charge forwards, raising his club. Pa! With a soft noise, Brown Bear's feet were suddenly frozen to the ground. The ice continued to creep upwards and, not long after, Brown Bear had become an ice sculpture. 1-inch Ash's ice boundary had arrived just in time. Seeing Brown Bear frozen into an ice cube, everyone was delighted. He had been completely frozen even under a 5-level suppression. It seemed like Brown Bear's resistance to ice was probably negative. This was a great opening to take. Yet Yi Shu didn't even have time to make plans to utilize this when with a bang, Frigid Eagle threw a lava flask directly at the ice sculpture of Brown Bear. The lava ran down the sculpture, instantly melting a good portion of the ice. Brown Bear struggled for a moment, cracking the ice, and swiftly escaped his frozen state. "These two assholes," everyone yelled out in shock. These two bosses not only shared aggro but were also so united and cooperative, knowing how to support one another. The difficulty of this battle had just risen again. Take Brown Bear into the room, isolate them from each other. Yi Shu immediately found a solution. It was only a team of 2, so how hard could it be? In the pro scene, they would have to face 5 players at once who were as close as they could get, and fought in sync. "Get the aggro off me." Wei Chen was still jumping around anxiously, because the two bosses' aggro had been locked on him after his failed hexagram prison and had yet to switch targets. With their line-up, windward formation would have to stop attacking to get the aggro pulled away. Wei Chen currently couldn't even use control skills to protect himself and was under immense pressure, being chased by 2 bosses. Hold on for just a moment longer, Yi Shu's Lord Grimm had already started to attack. Since they shared aggro, he didn't target Brown Bear, but just focused on bullying Frigid Eagle. Under Yi Shu's focused attack, the 2 bosses' attention finally switched to him. After checking the positions of the 2 bosses, Yi Shu didn't hesitate to head into the room at the front. The 2 bosses gave chase. Knowing the plan, no one went after Brown Bear, and all focused on Frigid Eagle instead. "Are you certain that you can hold the aggro?" Wei Chen then asked. Yi Shu's plan was that he would keep Brown Bear busy inside the room while the others stayed outside to beat Frigid Eagle up. Under these circumstances, the aggro of attackers outside would accumulate quickly and easily overtake Lord Grimm's aggro. After all, Frigid Eagle was much weaker and there were so many people focused on killing him. "Whoever OTs comes inside and keeps Brown Bear busy," Yi Shu said. "It's that a bit too dangerous?" Wei Chen said. It was okay for Yi Shu with his skill, but if it were Chen Guo or Luo Ji who had to go inside and keep Brown Bear busy, then it would be equal to sending them to their deaths. "Whoever has the greatest DPS shouldn't be too weak, right?" Yi Shu resolved the problem with a single retort. Whoever OT'd had to be the fiercest attacker. For those of Chen Guo and Luo Ji's skill level, they wouldn't possibly become that person. Wei Chen's worry had been for nothing. But it might still be a little troublesome for ranged characters. "Dawn Rifle, hold back on your DPS a little," Wei Chen added. "Right," Wu Chen agreed. It wasn't a very good idea for his launcher to go into that narrow room and keep a powerful melee boss busy. He had always had the highest DPS as they progressed, so it seemed like he would have to hold back now. With Wu Chen holding back, Tang Ru's Soft Mist's offense became even fiercer. Frigid Eagle wanted to charge into the room to support Brown Bear, but was locked in place by a whole group of people, so he could only make superficial counterattacks. Poor Frigid Eagle's health was falling with a whoosh and, not long after, his superficial attacks changed and gained focus. 2 rapid magical attacks sped towards Soft Mist. Switch. Yi Shu had also realized Brown Bear seemed to want to leave the room and that someone must have OT'd. Tang Ru's movements were swift. Soft Mist darted through the doorway with a dragon breaks the ranks, throwing Brown Bear's attention back to room that he was about to leave. At the same time, Yishu's Lord Grimm sped out of the room. Frigid Eagle was about to enter when Lord Grimm flew directly at him, blasting him back with a palm to the chest. Little Cold Hands, stand under the doorway and keep an eye on the situation inside, Yishu ordered the healer. After all, Tang Ru's skill wasn't quite as good as Yishu's and would be hard-pressed to stay inside without injury. Be careful to not OT, Little Hands. Yishu's only worry now was Little Cold Hands. With their strategy, the aggro would switch between them as they dealt damage. With that, the continuously healing that Little Cold Hands did would make his aggro accumulation the most stable. And Wen Yi might have improved greatly as of late, but, facing a boss alone, he would have no chance. I know, and Wen Yi had evidently also considered this, and made sure to not use any high-level heals that would accumulate a lot of aggro. Hold on, I'll switch with you soon. After giving Tang Ru those words of encouragement, Lord Grimm ran up to attack Frigid Eagle. The situation inside the room was far more dangerous than the situation outside. Frigid Eagle wasn't very strong anyways, so they were more or less just bullying him. Meanwhile, Brown Bear was powerful, and it was a one-on-one as well, so the difficulty was immense. After Soft Mist had entered the room, Little Cold Hands became exceptionally busy. Fighting a boss alone inside a room was a definite challenge for Tang Ru. We can't hold on like this for long, hurry, calculations were in Wen Yi's forte. Seeing Tang Ru's situation being completely different from Lord Grimm's while inside, he had to heal continuously. A little longer and it might be him who had to rush inside. If he went inside, that was equivalent to walking to his own death. Give me space, Yishu called out and Lord Grimm retreated to squish next to Little Cold Hands. Frigid Eagle, wanting to enter the room, followed after without prompting. Lord Grimm continued to give Frigid Eagle a beatdown while occasionally turning around to cast a heal on Soft Mist. This way, he not only took some pressure off of Little Cold Hands, but also gained more aggro for himself. Can your mana hold on like this? Wei Chen yelled. Chapter 868. Combo Kill. It won't be like this forever, Yishu replied to Wei Chen, continuing to take care of the situation on both sides. Seeing how her situation had made the battle more difficult, Tang Ru was determined to work even harder. She decisively abandoned her extremely offense-oriented style and focused on avoiding damage from her opponent, immediately taking a lot of pressure off the healer's shoulders. With this, it wasn't long before Lord Grimm's aggro went over the standard and the long-awaited OT finally occurred once more. Lord Grimm turned, stepping into the room. At the same time, Tang Ru's Soft Mist brushed by and exited the room, swinging her spear at Frigid Eagle. The battle inside the room against Brown Bear made Tang Ru feel extremely constrained. She had been forced to abandon her offense-oriented style for the team, but this went against her usual habits. Now that she didn't have to hold back anymore, Frigid Eagle immediately became the target of her catharsis. Soft Mist's spear swung like a windmill, releasing all sorts of skills and beating Frigid Eagle away from the doorway all the way to the edge of the courtyard, almost throwing him outside. With Tang Ru leading a vicious offense, the others could be a little more open with their attacks as well. Those who had classes that weren't appropriate for going inside the room and keeping Brown Bear busy had been sandbagging. Now that Soft Mist was mounting such a vicious offense, they didn't have to hold back as much, only so much so that their damage output wouldn't surpass Soft Mist's. Their damage output increased greatly and when it next came for Tang Ru to switch with Lord Grimm, Frigid Eagle's health had dropped by a large fraction. Not bad. When Lord Grimm came out, Yishu was pleased by how much Frigid Eagle had been damaged. They encouraged each other, boosted one another's morale, and with their strategy that used their advantage and technical skill to the fullest, they had broken the teamwork of the two bosses. After Lord Grimm and Soft Mist had switched places 5 times, their primary target Frigid Eagle finally fell. This boss was rather easy to deal with alone, not even giving everyone much trouble when he entered an enraged state. At Red Blood, Frigid Eagle became faster and rode his broom around a lot, attempting to use guerrilla tactics. Unfortunately for him, the formation that had surrounded him was close to perfect after fighting for so long. Frigid Eagle didn't even get a proper chance to fight back. Soon enough, the last 10% of his health was gone. As soon as Frigid Eagle fell, his first kill was announced on the TV. Though he might be rather weak, he was still classified as a boss by the system. However, before everyone could be relieved at the death of one boss, a loud roar came out from the room. Tang Ru gave a warning shout and then Brown Bear jumped out of the room, through the roof with a resounding crash. Red-eyed and radiating a bloody aura, Brown Bear seemed to be fully in an enraged state. Everyone noticed his speed as he swung his club down from the roof. It seemed like his stats had undergone a great increase. Has he already gone into an enraged state? Wei Chen asked in shock. If that was true, then they had miscalculated in their original strategy. The current Brown Bear still had plenty of health left. If he stayed in an enraged state like this, then the difficulty of this battle would rise again. After all, when most bosses entered such a state, they merely had a tenth of their health less and by then the battle was already coming to a close, so players could go wild with their DPS and quickly kill the boss. Yet now, a boss with over 95% of its health left had already entered an enraged state. They had to be cautious when facing it, there was little room for error. Seems that way, Yi Shu confirmed. There was no time for chit-chat though, they had a boss to deal with first. For a boss with immense strength like Brown Bear, players couldn't possibly parry the attacks. When the club swung down, Lord Grimm jumped lightly to avoid it as Myriad Manifestation Umbrella struck out in its spear form. The others continued to spectate, planning on taking a good look at the changes the boss had gone through after entering an enraged state. Brown Bear's roars rang in everyone's ears. With each weighty attack, everyone's view would tremble every now and then. Yi Shu's Lord Grimm stuck to him, prompting Brown Bear to make all sorts of attacks from different angles and directions and making sure everyone knew what sorts of skills this Brown Bear had. Ranged characters get to higher ground, Yi Shu began to arrange everyone's positions. Dawn Rifle, Chasing Haze, Windward Formation and Concealed Light, who didn't need to personally fight the boss, all jumped to higher ground. Cleric Little Cold Hands could also do such a thing, but, after taking a good look around, decided against it. Their current strategy relied a lot on avoiding the boss's attacks to take pressure off the healer, so they wouldn't stay in one place to attack, instead relying a lot on movement. The high ground in this courtyard didn't have a position with no blind spots, so for stability, and Wen Yi left Little Cold Hands on the ground. After finishing the arrangements, they opened fire on Yi Shu's order. Though Brown Bear was in an enraged state, his weakness had long since been noted by everyone, and that was his low resistance to magic. So in the following battle, Wei Chen's Warlock and Chao Yifan's Ghostblade were particularly eye-catching. Both classes had many CC skills. As Brown Bear ran after Lord Grimm, going berserk, 1-inch Ash had already filled the courtyard with ghost boundaries, and caused all sorts of status effects to pop up on Brown Bear's body. Wei Chen's Windward Formation wasn't slacking off either, a binding curse here, a control curse there, and a hexagram prison thrown into the mix. Take advantage of your own strengths and strike at your opponent's weaknesses. Brown Bear might have been in an enraged state, but under the combined effects of all these CC skills, his offensive ability was limited. Under 1-inch Ash's Plague Boundary, Brown Bear's defense had fallen, so his life was being depleted, just like Frigid Eagle's had. Keep going, maintain this pace. Quote, after taking a look at everyone's consumption, Yi Shu quickly calculated that they would be able to maintain this without too much pressure, so he didn't make them change their pace. With Brown Bear being bullied like this, there was naturally much less pressure on their healer's shoulders. And when Yi even had time to let Little Cold Hands throw a few skills like Hypnosis and Holy Commandment to support the team. In terms of supporting skills, clerics mostly focused on ones to do with supporting an offense. Finally, Brown Bear's health was approaching 10%. During this time, he had maintained the increases in strength that he had gained. However, would he go into another enraged state after falling to red blood? This was something they definitely had to be wary of. Yi Shu also decided to use the usual strategy to deal with this. When Brown Bear's health fell to 10%, there were indeed some changes. Compared to how he had gone wild with his attacks before, he seemed to become much calmer and his resistance seemed to have increased. Yet this strengthening from his red blood state wasn't enough to turn the tides. For a boss that had more or less been in an enraged state for the majority of the battle, the creator wasn't wretched enough to have his strength skyrocket 2 times in one battle. With just a tenth of his health left, Yi Shu and co didn't even really bother with too many CC skills. This change had come too late for Brown Bear. Brown Bear fell and the system announced their first kill in a timely fashion. Brown Bear's first kill announcement followed Frigid Eagle's announcement rather closely. The players who didn't know what the dungeon was like at all naturally expressed their admiration and surprise. Sealed Mountain Hideout had a total of 5 bosses. By now, 4 were dealt with. Did Guild Happy plan to clear the dungeon on their first explorative run? The players had mixed emotions about this, and all sorts of thoughts were discussed without holding back in the global chat. Yishu's group didn't bother with these discussions. With the defeat of 2 bosses, it was once again time to check the system's DPS charts. In reality, Yishu never had such habits. At his skill level, why would he bother with comparing dungeon DPS and taking joy in ranking higher than others? Repeatedly showing everyone the DPS chart like this today had caused everyone to realize that there was an ulterior motive to it. The DPS charts were there for Mofan to see. This guy who ate, lived, and gamed with them, but was never truly a part of the team, probably wouldn't listen even if you grabbed his ear and yelled. Now with the data open for viewing, there was no need to speak. He could figure things out for himself. With the data for the new section out, no one bothered to check their own, all looking for deceptions. In the end, it was the same as before. Deception appeared on the same level as Chasing Haze and Concealed Light, who weren't as skilled as everyone else. If someone would stop slacking off, our battles could definitely end a lot more quickly. With that, Lord Grimm headed off to the next area. Everyone had their characters follow while stretching their necks to look at Mofan's reaction. In reality, everyone knew that with Mofan's personality, he would either not join in, but if he did, he definitely wouldn't slack off. He was certainly doing his best to strike hard and fast, but for some reason, his DPS just wouldn't rise. It stayed at the same level as Chasing Haze and Concealed Light, who weren't as skilled, and everyone was surprised. Why was this happening? Mofan was gritting his teeth hard enough to shatter them, but he really didn't understand why. He was very familiar with the ninja class and was skilled at both PvP and PvE. When he went dungeoning with a few wild teams in the past, his DPS was always at a level that inspired awe in everyone. How come it fell so far after he had joined a team? Though these team members were incomparable to normal players, he shouldn't fall behind by so much. We have one more boss, Yishu said. To Mofan's ears, it sounded just like, you have one last chance, but how could he improve his DPS? Thinking deeply, Mofan really couldn't think of a reason for his low DPS. Was it because his hand speed wasn't fast enough? That didn't seem right. After all, Mofan was always with everyone. He might not interact with them much, but he was aware of everyone's circumstances. He had an understanding of things like their hand speeds. This probably wasn't the reason why he fell behind. Soon enough, their party arrived at the core of the Sealed Mountain hideout, Sealed Mountain Hall. In here sat the big boss of the Sealed Mountain Thieves hideout, Chief Sealed Mountain Tiger. Chapter 869. Chief Sealed Mountain Tiger. In comparison to Brown Bear, who was so buff that it looked wrong, the big boss of the Sealed Mountain Thieves and the final boss with Sealed Mountain in his name, Sealed Mountain Tiger, looked very normal. In the eyes of players, normal meant that he looked no different from your average player. If he was thrown into the main city, he would be mistaken for a player. However, as they approached the Sealed Mountain Hall step by step, Sealed Mountain Tiger suddenly stood from his tiger skin-covered throne in the center of the hall. It seemed like he had been waiting for them. Should they directly go into battle with the boss? After experiencing both the ambushes and the cooperation between boss numbers 3 and 4, everyone was hoping that there would be more tasks to complete before getting to fight the last boss. This was because if there weren't, then this boss was certain to be immensely powerful, to the point where fighting him alone would be more difficult than a road of ambushes and the combined power of Frigid Eagle and Brown Bear. Pioneering players only wanted to safely clear the dungeon, and didn't care about testing their limits against challenging stages. So, at this moment, no one hoped that Sealed Mountain Tiger was strong. If only he could be as weak as a normal monster, that would be great. Unfortunately, that was also impossible. In dungeons, the strength of bosses wouldn't necessarily increase as you ventured further into the dungeon. The second boss might be stronger than the third, and the third might be stronger than the fourth. However, the final boss would always be as strong as a final boss should be. They would be the most difficult to beat, sometimes even harder than hidden bosses. No matter how normal Sealed Mountain Tiger looked, Yishu and the others wouldn't underestimate him. As soon as they entered the plaza in the center of the hideout, everyone started to take in their environment and familiarize themselves with the terrain. This was battle preparation. After that, they approached slowly and the final boss finally reacted. Everyone, get back. As always, Lord Grimm stayed, everyone else retreated. Sealed Mountain Tiger's steps were calm, slowly walking out from the hall. Yishu didn't make any moves lightly either. He had to focus on figuring the boss out. There was no need to rush in to attack. Sealed Mountain Tiger was empty-handed, no weaponry in sight. His equipment wasn't of any recognizable class either. It was impossible to figure out what class this boss might be. But the boss had to act eventually. Standing on the stone steps in front of the Sealed Mountain Hall, only 18 steps away from Lord Grimm, Sealed Mountain Tiger glanced at Lord Grimm and raised his hand to strike. Not caring what it was, Yishu hurriedly had Lord Grimm dodge to the side. Yet what came at him wasn't a skill, but people. The originally empty plaza suddenly became populated with 4 people who had came out of nowhere. They didn't know if it was out of convenience or not, but the names above their heads were exceptionally simple: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. As soon as the 4 appeared, they didn't hesitate to charge towards Lord Grimm. As they charged, they each took out their own weapons. Lightsaber, revolver, boxing gloves, dagger. 4 people, 4 different classes, and looking at the weapons they were all DPS-focused classes. Were these the 4 elite killers working under Chief Sealed Mountain Tiger? Yishu didn't care about the backstories of NPCs. He would defeat them no matter what sort of backstory they had. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quickly engaged them. Beta, revolver in hand, was naturally the first to attack. Gunshots rang out and Lord Grimm moved out of the way. Blademaster Alpha, lightsaber raised, sent over a downwind sword slash. The speed of the attack didn't see much difference from the enraged brother Wolf. Lord Grimm sidestepped it. Unfortunately, Blademaster Alpha had already closed in on Lord Grimm with this attack, sending out more skills. Boom! A missile exploded between them. Lord Grimm was unmoved, but Blademaster Alpha was pushed back by the force of the explosion. Wu Chen's Dawn rifle had attacked first, and then Chen Guo's chasing haze also followed with a Gatling gun. Though they weren't your average monsters, they weren't nearly enough to be considered bosses. So for Happy, there was no need for Yishu to go up first and figure them out. As soon as they engaged in combat, Happy's members acted as well. Launcher's Dawn rifle and Chasing Haze's attacks were just the opening scene. Windward Formation's hexagram prison soon followed, falling on and entrapping Striker Gamma, who looked like he could beat an elephant to death with a single punch. The dagger-wielding Delta was an assassin, whose movement speed was very fast, to the point where he seemed to be having problems controlling it. He smashed directly into an oncoming brick, and then Tangru's dragon breaks the ranks arrived, slamming Assassin Delta into a stone lion in the plaza with the force. The gunner Beta, who had stayed away and kept shooting from afar, was now being kept busy by concealed light summons. With the protection of the team, Luo Ji didn't have to worry. If all he had to do was focus on controlling his 4 summons, then he had very good foundations for his skill level. The gunner Beta had to contend with 4 at once, no longer able to find the time to attack anyone else. Chao Yifan's 1-inch ash was the last to strike. Only after everyone had found their own targets did his ghost boundaries come to support them. Did these 4 elite killers of Sealed Mountain Tiger have any special team tactics? They didn't know. Since everyone had come up like this, they had isolated the 4 killers from one another. In a party like Happy's, there were more than enough people who were strong enough to stand on their own, so everyone had enough skill to be a DPS mount. Very good. Keep it up, Yishu had everyone continue, seeing that they were all doing pretty well. He wasn't bored enough hold back on purpose just to see what tricks these 4 killers had up their sleeves. So, Yishu's Lord Grimm dueled Blademaster Alpha, while Dawn Rifle and Chasing Haze provided backup from afar. Wei Chen's Windward Formation tormented Striker Gamma. Strikers had some of the lowest attack ranges, so he was helpless against Wei Chen's Warlock, whose cast range would shock everyone in the Glory Circle. Soft Mist and Steam Bun Invasion were wiping the floor with Assassin Delta, who went up against them alone. Most of the others were taking on one in teams of 2 or 3, but Concealed Light had managed to keep Gunner Beta occupied on his own. It was a pleasant surprise, but he didn't dare to be overconfident, taking extreme care in his performance. As for 1-inch Ash and Little Cold Hands, they sent support and healing wherever it was necessary. With everyone taking their own jobs, the 4 elite killers had been completely isolated from support and backup. Yet Happy's party wasn't necessarily a complete team either. They also had a guy who wasn't in sync with everyone else, and that was obviously Mo Fan's deception. This guy was like a headless fly. He didn't have a clear target, sometimes landing a few blows here, then sending a few skills there, like he was a firefighter. However, he wasn't nearly good at firefighting as 1-inch Ash and Little Cold Hands. It would have been no different had he not been there. Soon enough, Blademaster Alpha couldn't hold on any longer. He was been taking on 3 people at once, and among them was an expert like Yishu. It didn't need to be elaborated on how he was holding up. When his health fell to 10%, Yishu was careful and held back a little, uncertain if this monster, who could be an elite monster or a mini-boss, had an enraged state. When the Blademaster showed no change upon reaching red blood, it was evident that he didn't have an enraged state. Soon enough, Blademaster Alpha fell and Yishu's 3-person group prepared to switch targets and support another group. Yet, it was at this moment that Sealed Mountain Tiger raised his hand again, standing on the steps, and another Blademaster Alpha came out suddenly, exactly the same as the previous. Holy crap, this guy's a summoner. Yishu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They had thought this was a pre-boss battle or something, and had no idea they had actually already engaged the boss. Alpha, Beta, Gamma and Delta were actually Sealed Mountain Tiger's summons. If this was the case, then it was a bad idea to keep tangling with these 4. No matter how many summons died, it wouldn't cause any harm to the summoner. Though continuous summoning would take a toll on mana, but this was a boss. The mana consumption of a boss wasn't something players cared about since their mana was usually just as high as their health. Thinking of this, Yishu's Lord Grim immediately aimed his muzzle at the boss. At first they were thinking that they probably shouldn't provoke the boss before the final battle, but knowing what was really happening now, it would just be a waste of time to give the boss a wide berth. With a bang, bullets flew. Yet the newly summoned Blademaster Alpha courageously jumped in front of Sealed Mountain Tiger and took the hits for him. Meddlesome, Chen Guo scolded Blademaster Alpha loudly, sending a satellite beam directly at him. Sealed Mountain Tiger, who hadn't left the stone steps all this time, finally moved. Satellite beam wasn't a skill that one could block with their body, so it wouldn't matter how courageous and loyal a summon was. With this move, Sealed Mountain Tiger disappeared. When he reappeared, he was 10 body units away from his original position. He can teleport. This was a headache for the onwatching team Happy. Summoners didn't have much offensive or defensive capabilities and relied entirely on their summons for protection, making the class complicated to control and extremely passive in battle. So summoners needed to be very good with positioning and movement. This way, your opponent wouldn't be able to catch you and you could have your summons continuously attack. This made the use of summoners very complicated, to the point where not a single one had become an all-star yet. For positioning and movement, it was obvious that the faster the movement speed, the better, and was there anything faster than teleportation? It was good that this skill wasn't of the same class as summoners, so they couldn't learn it through normal means. However, self-made weapons could still give them built-in skills, no? So, in the Pro League, summoners would, without a doubt, choose to have teleport built into their weapons. This skill would definitely fortify a summoner's strength. And now, it seemed that the designers had noticed the advantages this sort of summoner had and designed a summoner boss who used that exact strategy. Also, bosses' class skills weren't necessarily the same as players'. If this boss had a low CD for teleportation, then that would be very annoying. Chapter 870. Combine. With a single teleport, Sealed Mountain Tiger had left Lord Grim far behind and the newly summoned Blademaster Alpha ran up to engage him. Lord Grim swung out his myriad manifestation umbrella and a quick sky strike sent the Blademaster airborne. A step to the side and then a falling flower palm sent the Blademaster into Windward Formation's range of control. Will you have any problems with keeping both of them occupied? Yishu asked Wei Chen. Wei Chen was especially straightforward, immediately replying, yeah, some. They might have been summons, but they were summoned by a level 75 final boss. The CC skills of a warlock were weakened quite a bit, unable to perform to their full potential. Being able to keep one under control was already very impressive, but Wei Chen couldn't fully hold on to two. Without waiting for Yishu to think of a new idea, a figure flashed by. Mo Fan's deception appeared, taking on Blademaster Alpha. Will our loner have any trouble taking it on alone? Yishu immediately asked. Mo Fan didn't reply, simply controlling deception to engage Blademaster Alpha. 1-inch Ash, pay a little more attention to the situation over here, Yishu still arranged. Okay, Chao Yifan agreed. Let's go and take out the leader. Saying this, Yishu had Lord Grim charge after Sealed Mountain Tiger. Dawn Rifle and Chasing Haze continued to provide ranged support. All three characters had ranged attacks, so gunshots sounded out before they even arrived. Missiles and bullets streaked through the air towards Sealed Mountain Tiger. Sealed Mountain Tiger didn't just rely on teleportation for moving, his movement speed was also very fast, allowing him to dodge the attacks from the three. Be careful to complement each other's attacks. I'll take the left, Da Rifle the right, Chasing Haze blast our target, Yishu commended. If they didn't take care to cooperate with each other, then their attacks would be no different from a single person's attacks. With Yishu's arrangement, their accuracy was assured, despite the cut in DPS. Lord Grim and Dawn Rifle's attacks limited Sealed Mountain Tiger's space for dodging, and Chasing Haze's attacks flew directly at him. Unless he teleported again, these attacks weren't something that could be dodged through normal means. Teleportation didn't appear again. It seemed that the CD time for Sealed Mountain Tiger wasn't short either, which was a huge relief for Yishu. The designer wasn't that inhumane, it seemed. Boom! Their attacks caused a chain of explosions, finally damaging Sealed Mountain Tiger. As a summoner, Sealed Mountain Tiger would try to follow or get closer to his opponents even with an aggro target. Sealed Mountain Tiger used his finger to point, sending commands. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta all had the intention to come over and protect their master, but with Happy's members keeping them occupied, they didn't have the chance. Will you be okay on your own, Soft Mist? Yishu suddenly asked. What do you think? Tengru's reply was full of confidence. Steamed Bun, get over here, Yishu decisively stole him. Now knowing that Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta were just summons, there was no need to waste much time and effort on them. As long as they were kept under control, it would be enough. They could imagine that this design for Sealed Mountain Tiger would cause a lot of parties to waste a lot of time and effort on a futile task if they didn't know its true face beforehand. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta didn't seem like summons at all. Even a god like Yishu hadn't realized at first, so how would normal players? With the level normal players had, they probably wouldn't be able to deal with just these four like Yishu and Ko could. For normal players, they would probably need to do quite a bit of research into how to beat this curtain raiser battle. Then, after accumulating the experience from all those defeats, they would finally manage a single victory, only to realize that this was a battle against the boss's summons. How cunning. When Yishu gave his final opinion on Sealed Mountain Tiger, he had already launched a two-pronged attack against the boss with Steam Bun, one coming at him from the front and the other from the back. In addition, his left and right were being taken care of by Dawn Rifle and Chasing Haze. You won't be able to escape, Steam Bun yelled threateningly. Don't let your guard down, Yishu warned sighed. This formation had taken a little bit of time to arrange. Yishu believed that Sealed Mountain Tiger's teleportation CD was up, otherwise there was no point in having the skill. Watch this, Steamed Bun hollered, having Steamed Bun Invasion charge forth. Go, yet Yishu's voice rang out only after Steamed Bun Invasion had begun to charge, seeming to be unnecessary. Seeing how he couldn't escape by normal means, Sealed Mountain Tiger attempted to teleport, as expected. This spell was an instant one, activated with the raise of his hand without any cast time. It was then that 6 pillars of light crashed into the ground like swords from the heavens and a hexagram lit up on the ground. Warlock skill, Hexagram Prison. The very second before Sealed Mountain Tiger's teleportation activated, Windward Formation's curse struck, entrapping Sealed Mountain Tiger before he could act. Under Hexagram Prison, even teleportation wouldn't activate. Not bad, Yishu praised Wei Chen. Wei Chen didn't have the time to reply. He still had to deal with Striker Gamma. Having barely managed to get enough time to throw a skill their way and with such precise timing, the action naturally didn't do any good for his situation. He was too busy trying to save his situation to reply. There was no need for Yishu to say anything more. Steamed Bun, Dawn Rifle, Chasing Haze, and Yishu's Lord Grim immediately attacked fiercely. With just the two satellite beams that crashed down one after another, the smaller beams reaching the middle, their target's survival seemed unreal. This wave of attacks caused immense damage. However, Hexagram Prison wouldn't entrap this level 75 final boss for long. Yet, the moment Hexagram Prison disappeared, a sacred white flame flickered to life and Sealed Mountain Tiger was burned in an instant. Cleric skill, Sacred Fire. The damage was secondary to the effect of the 3-second silence, which once again delayed Sealed Mountain Tiger's use of teleport. The four took this chance to deal as much damage as possible again. When the effect of Sacred Fire ended, Steam Bun Invasion ran up with a strangle, getting a solid grip on Sealed Mountain Tiger. Under this circumstance, teleportation also couldn't be used. Another wave of attacks flew, seeming to provoke Sealed Mountain Tiger. Strangle didn't really count as a CC skill, so characters under its effect could still attack. Sealed Mountain Tiger pushed out with his palm and there was a loud slapping sound. Steam Bun Invasion had somehow been slapped flying. This was the Battle Mage skill Falling Flower Palm. So this Sealed Mountain Tiger did have some offensive skills. Yet this sort of close combat skill seemed to be like a skill that players commonly added to their skill tree, often to make sure that their character had a few skills to protect themselves. This made it seem like Sealed Mountain Tiger really was designed based on what was mainstream for summoners. Io, so strong, Steam Bun Invasion was blown back quite the distance. A level 75 final dungeon boss's strength wasn't something to laugh about. However, in the time he took to send Steam Bun Invasion flying, he had taken a severe beating. Just as he wanted to teleport out of the way, he was caught by Lord Grimm and sent smashing into the ground, head over heels, with a grappler's back throw. Yi Shu arranged the entire team to delay Sealed Mountain Tiger's teleport for as long as possible. Unfortunately, this skill was instant and they didn't have any way to reliably predict its activation. Everyone was delaying it through their use of skill combos and their own experience. This wasn't infallible though. Eventually, a skill wasn't fast enough to continue the CC chain and allowed Sealed Mountain Tiger to teleport, immediately distancing himself from them. However, Yi Shu's reaction was fast. As Sealed Mountain Tiger darted away, his Lord Grimm was already chasing after him with a shadow clone. This time, Sealed Mountain Tiger didn't have a teleport to use. It might have a few close combat skills, but they weren't specialized, so how could he deal with Yi Shu? His greatest weapons were his summons, but they were being kept busy by the opponent. So, Sealed Mountain Tiger once again fell into his own personal hell, surrounded and getting beat on by Yi Shu, Steamed Bun, Wu Chen, and Chen Guo. Just from this battle, Sealed Mountain Tiger didn't seem much stronger than Frigid Eagle. However, that was mostly because the 4 summons were being heavily suppressed by 6 people, so their master was completely cut off from receiving their support. This definitely wasn't something a normal pioneering team could do. Team Happy's members were all very skilled in their own right, and this gave them a huge advantage against this boss. If it wasn't a team like theirs, they wouldn't be able to suppress Sealed Mountain Tiger so well. The battle continued. As they fought, there would naturally be some bumps, like when a summons was killed and resummoned, they had to spend time getting it under control again. Or, when someone lost control of a summons, it would come over and cause some trouble, but all this was dealt with, and the situation was maintained. Soon enough, they were approaching the boss's red blood state. Many players fell to this darkest period before dawn. What sort of ace did Sealed Mountain Tiger have up his sleeve? Since there were still 4 summons on the field, there was no way to clear the field for Lord Grimm to go forward and test out the boss. In their hunting down of the boss, his health fell to 10% and Yi Shu yelled a "careful" before watching the boss warily with everyone else. The current Sealed Mountain Tiger's demeanor had changed. He raised his arms to the sky. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta suddenly dispersed into smoke with 4 poof-s, but the Fa's weapons were left behind, spinning in the air. Then, they came together and flew into Sealed Mountain Tiger like souls, combining with Sealed Mountain Tiger. Seeing this, everyone had a vague idea of what changes Sealed Mountain Tiger had just gone through. With his last 10% of health, Sealed Mountain Tiger was no longer a summoner, but he had absorbed his summons power and took control of it himself, turning himself into a summons to battle. That isn't very impressive, is it? Wei Chen was already starting to lower his guard. This was just a boss with a rather complicated fighting style. With just 1/10 of its health left, it should be easy for them to deal with, right? As his words fell, a figure seemed to dart straight through Windward Formation, and Windward Formation suddenly erupted with a fountain of blood. This scene was incredibly familiar, almost exactly the same as when Brother Wolf had struck Don Rifle with downwind sword slash. Holy F***ck, seeing his health, Wei Chen had been scared shish *telis. Windward Formation had almost been one-shotted. Stop him, quick! Wei Chen didn't dare to lower his guard anymore. This summoner turned summons had terrifying attack power.